history we learn? I mean, where does it actually come from? How do you take centuries of messy, chaotic events and turn them into a single, straightforward story? And, who gets to be the first person to write it all down? Well, for a huge, really important chunk of Bengal's history, the answer to all those questions is this book right here. You're looking at the cover of Banglar Itihas, which is a Bengali translation of a really foundational text called the Riyaz us Salatin. For generations of historians, this was the place to start. This was ground zero. And that's a totally fair question, right? History spans thousands of years, so how does one single book become so influential? To really get that, we've got to jump back in time a bit and meet the guy who just knew he had to write it. So the man behind this massive project wasn't some king or a famous general. Nope, he was Ghulam Hussain Salim, a postmaster in the town of Malda, and he was working for the British East India Company. And from that really unique spot, he was watching history unfold right before his eyes. Okay, check out these dates, 1786 to 1788. This is what's so crucial. At this point, the old Mughal authority was basically gone. The power of the local Nawabs of Bengal had vanished, and the British East India Company, they were taking over, cementing their control. So right in the middle of all this change, Salim looks around and realizes that the memories of the past, the whole story of what came before, was about to be lost forever. Someone had to step up and put it all down on paper. And here's the kicker. This is what made his work such a game changer. According to his English translator, this wasn't just another royal diary or a list of dates. It was the first ever complete history of the Muslim era in Bengal. Think about it. Before Salim, you had scattered accounts, some court records, maybe a few poems. But nobody had ever tried to weave it all together into one single story from beginning to end. Salim was basically building the entire historical framework from scratch. So what did this grand story actually look like? What kind of ground did he cover? All right, let's take a quick spin through the pages and see just how he laid out the story of Bengal. And this page just illustrates his method perfectly. What we're looking at here is a page from the book's table of contents. See, it's not just a list of random events. It's a roadmap of power. Salim organized his entire history around who was in charge and how the center of power shifted over time. It's such a clean, logical way to make sense of hundreds of years of change. He basically breaks the whole history down into 4 major acts. First up, you have the early rulers, these governors sent from the powerful Delhi Sultanate. Then comes this amazing era of the independent sultans. That's when Bengal really became its own powerful kingdom. The third act is when Bengal gets absorbed into the massive Mughal Empire, ruled by governors they called Nazams. And the final act, which was happening in Salim's own lifetime, covers the arrival and growing influence of the European powers. And you can literally see this structure right here in the text. On the left, in the table of contents, you've got the list of governors sent from Delhi. But then, look to the right. A whole new chapter begins, called The Independent Muslim Kings of Bengal. Salim draws a clear line in the sand. He's marking the exact moment the region stepped into the spotlight on its own terms. And the story just keeps rolling right up to the modern era. On the left, you see these long lists of the Mughal Nazams who governed Bengal. Then, over on the right, the final part of the book details the arrival of the Portuguese, the Dutch, and finally the English East India Company. I mean, he literally took the story from medieval times all the way to the dawn of colonial rule. It's incredibly comprehensive. Now, look, writing a masterpiece is one thing, but how does a book written over 200 years ago in a language that very few people use for this stuff anymore stay so important? Well, its survival is a pretty incredible story all on its own. The secret to its long life? Translation. Salim originally wrote his history in Persian. That was the official language of the court, of government, of high culture across a lot of India back then. But, times change, and Persian eventually faded from common use. So for the history to actually survive and reach the very people whose story it told, it had to be reborn in a new language, Bengali. Seriously, this book is still with us thanks to a whole chain of dedicated people. First, of course, you have Ghulam Hussain Salim, the original author. Then, decades later, a scholar named Maulavi Abdus Salam took on the huge job of translating it into English. That opened it up to the whole world. And finally, that work was translated into Bengali by Akbaruddin, which brought the story full circle, right back to the people of Bengal. Each one of these translators was like a guardian of this history. And that, right there, is the real heart of it. The lasting power of Salim's work isn't just about the facts and dates he saved. Its true genius is that he took centuries of chaos, of wars and dynasties and betrayals, and he forged them into a single, understandable story. He didn't just record history, he actually created a historical narrative for Bengal. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Ghulam Hussein Salim saw a story that needed a storyteller, and he stepped up. It's just such a powerful reminder that every history we read is a narrative, an interpretation shaped by a real person. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. What essential stories from our own time are still out there, just waiting for someone to tell them?